Because the reality is I do understand the human condition and recognize that it's not me, it's them. So if they're judging me, it's based on their own perceptions of moral character. Now, if I'm not confident enough with how I show up for me and my people, then that's the issue that I need to address, not whether or not someone likes me or accepts me or thinks that I am watchable. Most conversations about connection tell you what to think. But are easy answers ever enough? I'm Keith Richardson. With my co-host Gerren Taylor, this is More in Common. Honest conversations about what keeps us apart and what doesn't have to. Come think with us.
When's the last time you karaoke'd, Keith?
A year ago.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was a friend's birthday party. What did I karaoke?
Yeah.
Wait for it, Hamilton.
Wow. That's a good one.
Yeah. It's
funny,
funny,
is that
though,
something I would
because
have jumped to for a Yoki song, but I can see it working.
it's a song I really like, so I know the words.
This is an important context for karaoke.
The audience, like it's just, you could tell, like, as much as I like Hamilton, the audience might not have known much about the Wait For It song, right? And so I'm thinking, this is great, talk about judgment, right? But funny thing, flip side, there were these two women who went up and sang one of the medley from Pitch Perfect 1. And if I wasn't in so much support for that medley, and they just owned it, they went for it, and I guarantee most people in that audience had no idea what they were doing, but I did, and I was all for it. All for it.
This is the More in Common podcast. I'm Gerren Taylor. That's Keith Richardson. If you see him out at karaoke, do Pitch Perfect, and he'll get a round of applause.
You got your number one fan. I might join you. I'm not gonna lie.
Did you feel judged after? Did you feel like they were like, what was that?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. Like, I didn't engage with them. I was just like hyping them up while they were on stage. But I don't even honestly think they saw me, so I wasn't too concerned about it. Because it's karaoke. If you want to talk about removing judgment, like, you best remove your own judgment of other people. Oh, total side note. We were at another karaoke bar one time, and someone started singing Billy Joel. And I swear to you on all my life that everybody in that place, you couldn't see them because of the way it was set up. Like, you just couldn't see him. Sounded just like him. We were like, is he here? It was incredible. He got a round of applause. Let's be. His status amongst the karaokers in that bar went through.
Yeah. I love that.
So to carry over from last week, there is this element of judgment that we just don't experience the same way. Whether it's the show, whether it's the fact that you are in Tijuana and you left the States, you live in Mexico, we're talking about, we talk about American things, and turns out you're black, I'm white. It is, our social experiences are different relative to this. And I often take one frame, and you'll often think about it differently. And we've had tension points in the past on this. I'm curious how this lands for you. Like, what is it that you experience relative to this conversation about judgment, being judged, judging others, all of it?
I will say this in a completely candid way. Obviously, we're close. We're homies. When you first mentioned the idea of the judgment and being canceled and how that works, I legitimately was like, in my head, like, it's kind of a white guy. You know what I mean?
Honor that.
As a black dude, I feel both incredibly always seen and also always invisible. Especially in American society, right? I was watching this clip on the idiot box, the internet, the other day, and they were talking about this
The idiot box.
1993 movie with Eddie Murphy called Boomerang. And I don't know if you know the
I
context
remember
of the
that
movie.
movie.
Yeah, Mushroom
Yeah.
Jacket, Mushroom Belt. Uh,
Yeah.
and Jay Leno was interviewing Eddie Murphy about the film, and he was reading an LA Times review from the moment.
This reviewer says, the most intriguing aspect of Boomerang turns out not its story, but its racial composition. It says, this takes pains to create a reverse world from which white people are invisible. Now,
oh yeah, this cat in the LA Times was tripping because there were no, there were white people in the movie, but there were no white leads in it. And you take a picture like Boys in the Hood. No one tripped about that because it was, a movie that dealt with like a violent thing, but regular thing, and it was business. So we're the white people. Who's running that office? It was that kind of.
And the LA Times review basically was saying, and they've invented this reverse world where white people are basically non-existent. And Eddie's like laughing, like, ha ha ha. Yeah, there's no white leads in it. There's some black people and they all are in the office. And he said, I guess to the reviewer's mind, he's like, well, where's the white guy? Who's running that office? And it's kind of like that, because the juxtaposition that Eddie also made is that, Boys in the Hood had recently came out and there's no white leads in Boys in the Hood, but no one said anything about that because the context of that movie is they're gangsters. It's in the hood. But as soon as the black people are in the office, it's like, well, are there no Caucasians? So there is that kind of hyperly visible, but also invisible at the same time, right? And I think that's a great way to kind of explain the basicness on how I feel it. But obviously it's complicated even more by my bicultural bilingualness. Not that I'm ever trying to be Mexican. I just am this way, right? The birthday party I was talking about last week, karaoke. I'm a karaoke guy. I kind of forced it to happen, to be honest with you. But I also sang a song in Spanish. And as it came on and people were like looking at me on the mic, they were like, do you know this? And I'm like, same to your point, like, I don't need the words. Like, I know the song by heart, So I like the ability to surprise in that sense. But also, it is, to your point, it is something extra. Sometimes, oftentimes, a lot of times, to be black, right? I make content about the news of Mexico, the things that are going on here, and I translate like a lot of Spanish language articles into English, and that's what I do on TikTok or whatever. And there are people be like, "Why don't you talk about Africa?" Just like basic internet racism, and I'm like,
yeah,
like what does that
I
even?
like that you said basic internet racism because it's there.
There's levels to this, right? It's like, if you want to just go for the baseline racism, that's not even funny. At least be creative if you're going to be racist. So that's all I ask, Give me a chuckle out of it before. But it does create a certain amount of fear, like almost fear of my own success in some ways, right? Like I've been recognized out in the streets in TJ as being a content creator, or people will comment, "Oh, I saw you at X, Y, and Z place." And like, I feel overseen in some ways like that. Like I don't love that part of it, these worlds colliding and not feeling overly surveilled, right? Oh, that guy from TikTok, and then they record you when you're not paying attention and you have no context for it, right? And then, so it's a fear that exists without even being named in some ways, that my own success on the internet as a creator could create an amount of hyper visibility that reduces me into acting or having to perform a certain way, or having to be hyper vigilant about who I am and how I interact so I don't overturn the apple cart of my own self-image.
Man. So how does that show up, before I go on any kind of diatribe, how does that show up for you and how you judge? Like, how does judgment then affect your own behavior?
Yeah. I definitely try to take people for what they are, right? I know that we are genuinely complicated humans who have dispersed backgrounds and interests, and I also try to support people who are doing things to break that kind of stereotypical perception malaise of, what we can and cannot talk about as creators. But I definitely still have judgments about people. I definitely look at, so there are some black creators, black males, especially in like this cross-cultural bilingual space. And I judge some of them as being culture vultures. I really do. Like, you dress up in it, you go out and dance, but do you really love the culture? Do you know anything about it? Did you try to learn to speak Spanish? Are you trying to learn, you know what I mean? Or you just think it's cute to be the black guy that operates.
So, boy, did you just open up a can of worms on all that stuff, right? Like, I think first and foremost, if I could respond, like the nature of the microscope that you feel under, especially being a Black American in Mexico, and all of the things that you just mentioned, like the counterpoint will often be, no one's judging you. Like, why does you being black, right? Like, this would be a potential white person, some stereotypical white person. Why? That's not reasonable. That's not fair. And I'll use a really charged example on this is, relationship with police. It is a small percentage of police officers who wield their weapons and do so. I'm taking ICE off of the table because that's a whole different engagement model, but just general, police officers. And there is a perception that it's like, oh yeah, but most police officers aren't going to hurt you. And in fact, as a white person, I worry about a police officer giving me a ticket, so I avoid them. I never worry about the violence angle. And while the violence angle is wildly small by percentage of action, it's wildly large by percentage of consequence. Mm-hmm. So the perceptions that we have of groups are shaped by our cultural experience around those groups. And for you, it's going to have a different perception. And for me, the point there isn't to judge your judgments, right? Like that's the shift in this conversation around judgments. It is understanding, exploring, and having that connection point in conversation that shapes it. And doing the thing, right? Like you just shaped. I look at these other Black cross-cultural connectors and I ask myself all of these questions, and inherently you answer them for yourself without actually inspecting and inquiring. You're jumping to conclusions, you're making these judgments, and that inherently negatively impacts space and time and how we connect and communicate and work with other people. The solution there, right? Not to say just for you, but this is the broader space, is that one, I don't like it because this is what I think they might be doing, but I really don't know, but I still don't like it. Because I don't like it, I'm just not going to watch it. They're going to go out, they're going to do their own thing. And people who don't see them that way, that don't judge them that way, that accept what they do, is positive. Now, there is a line in all of this. And that is, how dangerous is what someone is putting out there, right? How much negative impact is someone? You look at what's the guy that just got arrested in Europe? Manosphere guy.
Andrew Tate. He was arrested in Miami.
Andrew Tate. Yeah, arrested, right? Like platforming Andrew Tate and just saying, hey, Andrew Tate put stuff out there. Like he's been arrested, charged, accused of sex trafficking, raping. He's a dangerous human being. Right? I can't allow my judgments to be inspected. Like action needs to be taken. Thoughts, like we need to move in a different direction. That can't be part of our cultural zeitgeist.
Right.
But again, how many Andrew Tates are there?
Well, I mean, it's to your point, right? Like both the policing thing, the Andrew Tates and the creators thing are about how we perceive the impacts. I actually had this happen on the internet the other day where, why do black people always have to make everything about race? Well, I tell you what, if you're black, it sure does feel like everybody else makes everything else about your race all the time. So, but with the cops, like one small error can be it. And that's real.
the only judgment you have is that they're wearing a uniform.
Correct.
Like,
well, to your point, right? If 90% of the police force is perfectly cool and only 10% are highly racist, but those racists are willing to kill me, am I willing to take that chance? That's a hell of a gamble. That's roulette with your life every day. And as a black American who lives in Mexico, I used to get this butthole clenching feeling when I get cop lights behind me, because you never know. I've had experiences with racist cops. I'm lucky enough that I can code switch and I can disarm and I can be the magical Negro for 10 minutes and make them feel comfortable, but not everybody can do that. So it's a hell of a gamble just existing in that space and times. And I think that sometimes too, part of the judgment that gets extended is looking at other people of color and being like, do you make this better or worse for all of us? Even though that's not their job, even though they're probably not thinking about that, It was like Jonathan was saying, like you walk into the room and you suddenly represent every black person ever that person across from you has had an experience with. You're judged either against them negatively or positively by how you compare to them. And again, it's something that people do almost naturally and not necessarily from a bad place, but it is still a lot of work.
And so I think that is the pivot point there, because it doesn't have to be this way. First, like, we need to recognize that everything isn't biological. The default to say, I'm judging them because of biological traits, or I judge because of my genetic coding or my it just doesn't work that way, right? Inherently, you can go back in time, and we do this in past. Like, there was a reason slavery didn't end right away in America. The cultural acceptances of certain things have mass movement and appeal. There is a reason it used to be okay to sleep with your cousin, get married to your cousin, have kids with your cousin. The culture that it's very what? Alabama. Yeah. But it used to be a very common thing. All the societies that we grow up in aren't just shaped by the time that you live in them. They're shaped by the time before that, and the time before that. And I'm going to use a really interesting example that I think is really, really important to shape. We need to get away from this biological default conversation so we can understand judgment in a more meaningful way, so we can judge less about people who are judging for their own safety, and we can be more meaningful in the judgments and how we wield them for the safety of others, not just because. Walking down the street and seeing an overweight person and it's telling your story and whatever it ends up being is a detrimental judgment that serves no purpose. These judgments are not just inherently biological, they are culturally shaped.
Right.
And the example, so I'm reading this book, it's called The Weirdest People, and it's talking about the arc of individualism. And we think today that it is just human nature to want to advance, to grow, to develop, to build.
Mm-hmm.
We want to, that's just what we do. We migrate, we move, we explore. Well, from an anthropological standpoint, that couldn't be further from the truth. Exploration and advancement only occurred every few thousand years when a tribe ran out of resources, when population started to grow and a tribe grew beyond its scalable sense. So part of that tribe had to move on. Maybe there was conflict and they moved on. All of a sudden the world got fully populated and no one had anywhere else to move. So now we had to grow and organize and create civilization. Shared agriculture was discovered 12,000 years ago in the Middle East. It took another 4,000 to 6,000 years for it to become common practice. It was actually rejected for thousands upon thousands of years. We don't just gravitate to these. And so in The Weirdest People, though, it talks about the shaping of the brain based on literacy. And that in 1517, literacy started to become a bigger movement amongst Protestants, because Protestants believed, inherent to their foundational principle, that you need to read the Bible in order to learn that personal journey in relationship to the religion and to God. Prior to that, and this is even true in the Catholic religion, which you see because they have a pope, it's based on the authority that disseminates that information to you. So people didn't have an incentive to learn to read. So in Protestant societies, people learn to read. Well, what ends up happening when literacy rates go higher, our brain actually shapes differently. So we actually have sharper facial recognition, but we have poor visual recognition. People who are illiterate actually have a broader visual acuity to the things around them. They connect to visualization, and it's proven by, like, if I show you a letter R and I tell you not to read it, you can't. If I show someone who doesn't know how to read a letter R, they see a picture. They just see a line shaped a certain way, and they see it differently. And what that ends up doing is people who read over time actually are more logical in their reasoning. Well, you look at American society in the development, and so like the case that is made in the book is that this journey of literacy expansion and migration is all because of how our brain has been shaped around the cultural expectations of reading and what reading actually physically does to our brain. And thus we have the Industrial Revolution, because we're solving problems and we're reading all this stuff and we're thinking differently than human history has ever thought in all of historical time. So it's not biological.
Yeah, it's
right?
learned.
Like these things are inherited generation after generation. They're informed by the cultural experiences that we all take shape and that inform us. And if we can be more aware of that and understand that this isn't just something that you think logically about, that you're rational, that you are human, therefore this.
Well, to that point, you were speaking in our other episode about you have a specific fear about being judged by people whose respect you don't have to earn. And I wanted to unpack that, because who are those people for you? Who is the type of person whose judgment you still consider or land about, even though you probably don't think you should or shouldn't?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's that person on the internet, right? It's that person I don't know well enough to have allowed that, like, because I know they are going to judge me. They're going to create a narrative and a story. Because what did you had a friend say that they can't listen to our show because for whatever reason they can't take me. They look at me and they don't like me. Right? It's that person. Like, because I can't appeal to everybody, but I want to. I inherently want to, because I want to be liked. And it's interesting on the flip side of this, relative to the shift. What has made me shift in this too is I have a friend. We have friends, it's a couple friends of ours, who does not feel or worry. I mean, she inherently probably does a little bit, but as she said, 33% of people like me, 33% hate me, 33% couldn't care about me. And she's a lot. She's a big personality. First time I met her, came home, I said, because our kids were best friends at the time. I told Cheryl, I was like, I don't know if I want our kids to be friends, because I'm not a big fan of Mom, right? And I had a 10-minute interaction with her, and I was just like, write her off. They are the closest friends we have in town. Like, their kids our kids consider family. We all go out to dinner together. Because we, in a way, were forced to move past that, to see underneath this brash exterior, to go a step further. And what I worry about, for me, to your question, is like people just not being willing to give me that chance. But since we had that conversation, and it wasn't that long ago, it has materially, like, there's been a lot of things that have gone on in my self-discovery that don't worry about it as much just since that conversation. Because the reality is, I do understand the human condition and recognize that it's not me, it's them. So if they're judging me, it's based on their own perceptions of moral character. Now, if I'm not confident enough with how I show up for me and my people, then that's the issue that I need to address, not whether or not someone likes me or accepts me or thinks that I am watchable simply because they find me appealing or not appealing, right? And it's really been, I mean, and we're talking about months of a super intentional journey. I said it in the last episode. This podcast, over the last 6 months in particular, has meaningfully changed my life, just because we sit here and explore these ideas and talk about them, because we dig into them in a more meaningful way. And it's like, oh, how am I showing up? And I use my friend as an example. I wouldn't have a friend if I just decided, nope, she's not for me.
And that's the interesting thing about the reflective work on this show, right? As much as we're trying to give to an audience and build and help people have tools, sometimes it's us. Sometimes it's us who benefit the most.
Rodney used to say it, and he said it all the time. You do the things that you need most. Right? And sometimes you just don't know you need it.
And I hear you making that progress. I see that, and I applaud you for it. Is there anything else about I don't want to describe it as like faking or putting on a mask, but do you ever catch yourself like trying to make that adjustment, or are you now more toward the, you know what, it is what it is, this is who you get?
No, I do. So I think this is part of the meaningful outcomes of this podcast. Every situation doesn't require all of me, but every situation requires a sincere reflection of who I am. And it's not because we talked about this in that episode, the subtle art of not giving a fuck, right? Like, you can show up in spaces and have a negative impact on other people. Like, recognizing the situation you're in, recognizing that, hey, look, one of the things that I've learned to recognize, where I used to be like, I want to be friends with everybody, is if I'm in a social situation, it's like, yeah, this might not be the place. Maybe it is. And you can tiptoe. And if it's not, and it ends up being, you bring something up or people there are like, no thanks, dude, then I step back and I don't enter that space again. But this goes back into the judgment. I don't need to judge that space either, unless it's negative to other people. Like, if it's legitimately creating negative outcomes for other people. And 99%, yeah, like, there's no danger in most of our situations. But I want to flip this back, because I do have a closing thought on what to do about this. I'm curious from your perspective, starting from the beginning of the show, asking that question about your experience with this. How do you now navigate it? How do you explore it? Because there is a level of complexity that is just similar to to our Western American experience. But then there are the added layers that you have that you explore. What does that look like for you?
I base it in the Hamlet quote. This above all to thine own self be true. The reality is, I am all of these things. I am all of these things simultaneously. And to your point, like, showing up doesn't require me all of me in all of these spaces. But trying to maintain that coherent identity across multiple social relationships in public, on internet, it's still exhausting for me. I genuinely don't want to do it. And so it's become more of the, like, well, you remember as a teenager, you were probably way more, well, not necessarily everybody, but I certainly was, like, way less I didn't think about embarrassment. I did silly things because I thought about them being funny, and there was no. Thank God there was no cell phone videos of all the random stuff that we used to do. But now the kids are always performing, right? And so it's that part. It's the part that I know better now, that I'll show up for certain people in certain ways, and that's just going to be how it is. I can't control how you perceive me or how you know me. I can just be the me that's there today, and that's got to be enough.
Dude, that's got to be. And look, I think two things on this. Number one, there is just this general recognition that like how we navigate judgment is an acknowledgement that there is a biological element, but the cultural elements that shape around how we enter spaces, work through spaces, navigate spaces, really are informed based on our ability to find our people and work through this. And I heard this guy one time talk about dating now, and his most insightful sentiment, he goes, look, dating now, at any point, if you do or say the wrong thing, someone can pull out their phone and record you and totally shame you. And I think there is a tiptoe that has to occur that is part of the cultural. If I would love to unwind that piece, but it's also being aware of these cultural influences that say, I'm going to show up with a minimal amount of me to assess whether or not I'm going to be with somebody who's going to do that. Then once I determine that they're not going to be that person, then I can expand a little bit more of me through that process. Because, dating is a great example of how it's like, who the fuck knows what to say?
Well, it's such a good example too, because it's supposed to be a private situation in between you and a person. But I saw a video the other day where the girl was mad that he took her to Cheesecake Factory, and they had she had a whole argument about it. Like she deserved more than Cheesecake Factory on her first date. And like, wow. Not only to feel that way, but also to put that on the internet as if he did something wrong. And to try to shame him and make him feel bad. Like it's a date. You know what I mean? Like,
time to leave that situation, by the way. Like just walk away and go enter a different one.
Well, yeah, no, definitely. Like good on him for finding that red flag early, but
yeah, right. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's like this whole thing is complicated. We have the ability to collectively shape how we navigate these spaces, talk about other people, think about other people, work with other people, see our relationships, recognize that we're really bad at judgments. Like they are not universal truths. They are not inherently absolute. And in that, we can navigate the world in a more meaningful way, but also understand, hey, sometimes I got to accept this judgment because I'm just going to accept that I'm judging you or that you're judging me. You recognize that I'm not for you and I recognize you're not for me, and we're going to just move on. And it's not a reflection of your moral character. It's a reflection of just the spaces that you want in an individualistic society that, as much as I would love to unravel, we're just not going to. We got to find a way to inherit our need for connection and collectivist action into the individual state of needs and wants, and finding that merge point where there's balance in that is a generational journey. And if we give up today, because this is not something for our lifetime, like this is just not something for our lifetime. It's for our kids and our grandkids and grandkids after that. What are we actually leaving for them?
It's ultimately there's hard questions and no easy answers, right? We've named a lot of things, we've identified them, but that doesn't mean it's a solution, doesn't mean it's going to go away. The reality is this is the world we're in. And to your point, this is why we keep showing up, right? Like we don't show up because we think we're going to solve this tomorrow and make everything honky-dory, but we know that if we don't do the work, if we don't have these conversations, we certainly never will.
Yep. Especially
More in
if
Common
you're being
podcast.
judged for it.
That's right. This is the More in Common podcast. I'm Gerren Taylor. That's Keith Richardson. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again next week.